So I think everyone's been able to join. Are we ready to get started? I think so. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Arthur Gallinet. I'm the director of the ISSS at the University of Connecticut and your 2023 Spring Immigration Workshop coordinator. Thank you so much for coming today. I just have a little housekeeping, and then I'm going to be muted and in the background. The first thing, you probably heard this a million times already this week, but we've got some Zoom tips. If you want to change your name, you can right click on your photo and change your name to include your institution and your pronouns. Turn on your video. We want to see you. Who's here? This is a great opportunity for you to interact with our keynote speakers, and I think they will feed off of your energy. So please turn on your videos. Although we do want you to mute yourself because we're here to listen to Gaby talk. And so turn on your videos, but mute your microphones. Feel free to connect with your colleagues through the chat. You can put any questions that you think of in the chat. This is a great time for you, so ask questions. And then, lastly, SIW is hosted by the NAFTA Region 11 GRAC team, the Government Regulations Advisory Committee. This is a subcommittee of Region 11 that's focused on U.S. laws, rules, and regulations as they pertain to international students and scholars. We put out a call for new members every year in June. Keep an eye on your email. At the end of this week or maybe early next week, we're going to send out an evaluation on the Spring Immigration Workshop, and there'll also be a chance for you to share what you'd like to see from the SIW in the future, and an opportunity for you to indicate if you want to get more involved with GRAC in the future. So please keep an eye out for that email either at the end of this week or early next week. And then, today is not the last day or the last session. So there's still more sessions after this one today. And then tomorrow we have a lot of great community roundtables. And so if you haven't signed up for them, please visit the Region 11 Spring Immigration Workshop website and please register for those sessions. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Goss.
Hi, thanks for coming, everybody. I'm the past chair of GRAC and have the honor of introducing Maria Gabriela Pacheco, or Gaby Pacheco, from the DREAM US. Gaby has been a passionate activist in the immigration space for many years, and she's nationally recognized for her rights as an immigration rights leader. She's gained significant recognition for her courageous advocacy of the DREAM Act since 2004. Probably before. And in 2005, she led a group of youth advocating for in-state tuition for undocumented students. So she's been on the cutting edge of this issue that many of us have known for many years. And I'm very excited to have her join us today, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Arthur, I don't know if she can unmute herself. Can you check that? Oh, you got it. Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Arthur and Liz. It is so wonderful to be with all of you. I have a very special place in my heart for international student offices at colleges and universities, and you'll hear in a little bit why. But first, I just want to say how grateful I am for this space. Like Liz said, I have been working in the immigrant rights world for a long time, being that I was a former dreamer. And so my story actually starts in Ecuador. That's where I was born. And when I was about 8 years old, my family decided that they wanted to move from Ecuador to the United States. And when I was younger, this move didn't really mean much. We had moved before, and in Ecuador, in Guayaquil, where I'm from. And so in my mind, I thought that Ecuador was the whole entire world. And I think the reason for that is that back in the day, I don't see these in classrooms anymore, but we used to have the globe. And when you turn the globe, what you see is this line all around, and it says equator, equator, equator. And so in my mind, as a 7-8-year-old, I actually thought the whole entire world was Ecuador. And when I moved to Miami, couple of months in, I started to realize, okay, we're really far from our family. We haven't gone to see my grandparents. These big parties that we used to have with all the cousins, coming together are not happening. Something's going on. But I loved school, and I was really, really excited about my new school. I was excited that we got to walk from the house to school. That was a big, no, right? In Ecuador, we had either a private company that would take us to the school. And so I quickly acclimated to my surroundings. And one of the things my parents did when they first moved is that they sought out legal help. And one of the things that an lawyer said is that it would be really important for them to not lose the status. And one way for the children not to lose their status was actually having us get an international student visa. So when I was in 3rd grade, we actually had international student visas. And we had this thing called duration status, which I'm sure all of you know. And when it was explained to my parents, they told them, as long as you're going to school, you're okay. So I went to school, and I went from 5th grade to 6th grade. So I moved from elementary school to middle school, and we had duration status. So my parents thought, okay, as long as you're in school, you're okay. But as you all know, if you change schools, you have to also renew the visa. And so when my older sister tried to go to college, they told her, you don't have the right kind of papers. You don't have the ability to do so. And so at that time, I was in middle school. I was going into the 8th grade. And I really freaked out, and I thought, oh no, she's not able to go to school. Something's going to happen to me too. And since I was a little girl, I really took on education seriously. When they would talk about careers and what you wanted to be when you grow up, I knew I wanted to go to college. And in 5th grade, we had the opportunity to tour and be at the University of Miami for a whole entire week. It was called the Superintendent's Music Festival, and I was chosen among thousands of kids in Dade County to attend this festival for 1 week at the University of Miami. And I fell in love with the concept of school. Everything, all the buildings were so big, and we got the liberty to walk around. And what really was the icing on the cake for me was the first day we were walking on campus, and they told us we can go to the cafeteria to get lunch. And as soon as those electric doors open, our eyes, I remember all of us, we said, like, we let out a really big whoa, because all in here was Taco Bell and McDonald's and Burger King and Panda Express. And so all these different restaurants that, of course, we were used to just standing in line and getting our tray of whatever the food was that day in the cafeteria. So that day, I was determined that I was going to go to college, and I was going to have this big world, big kid experience, adult experience of getting to choose my own food. But fast forward into high school, I was a good student, really well-rounded, you name it, I was involved in. And I was working really hard to show that I had, that I was not just driven, but I was talented, and that I really wanted to prove to the adults that I was worthy, that I would do really well in school, and that I wanted to give back. So I actually have a friend I had a friend then that was part of the yearbook, and she was like, Gabby, like, I'm part of the yearbook, and yet you are in almost every page, right? Because I was in the JROTC program, I was in the music program, in the National Honor Society. I took classes at night. I just wanted to absorb as much as I could, because I knew that potentially, because I didn't have the right kind of papers, I had lost my status going from 5th to 6th grade. I was, in essence, my family was undocumented. So I start telling my story in high school, and I start telling people I don't have papers and what can I do? And actually in 12th grade, in one of these big college resources fairs that they had, there was a woman from Miami-Dade College that said, look, I can see how driven you are. I don't know what I can do, but I'm going to try to help you. And I also remembered being in that office where I was given my international student visa, and it was processed. And I went and looked for that woman, and I said to her, look, like, I need your help. And so I actually was able to renew my visa. It's a miracle. I know I've talked to so many different attorneys and folks that work with international students, and they're like, how did you do this? Right. And I'm like, I don't know. But in college, at Miami-Dade College, we submitted a packet and requested for my international student visa that had lapsed since 5th, 6th grade to be renewed. And that's how I was able to actually go to college. And so that's a tidbit of my story that I don't really tell people because they don't understand, but all of you understand this component and piece. And for a very long time, I was an international student at Miami-Dade College, even though I was a dreamer, even though I did not have the resources to be able to pay or have a sponsor or somebody. And that's another story for another day, how I was able to come up with that. But that experience to me was really important, because the International Student Office played a role that wasn't really theirs, right? They worked with other dreamers like me. They understood the desire of young people to have an education. And at the time, we didn't have in-state tuition. So any undocumented student actually had to pay either the international student fee or as an out-of-state tuition. So international students and dreamers, undocumented students, would band together and would work together. And the support that we received from, I would never forget her, Flores, who was the director of the International Student Department at Miami-Dade College, was very critical to us and to the work that I was doing. So I started fighting for not just dreamers, but also just the recognition of what was happening in our immigration system. And that led me to one day in 2009, I had already, in order to keep my status, was working on my 4th undergrad degree. So I already had an associate's in arts, an associate's in science, a bachelor's degree, and I was working now on an associate's in science to be able to keep the visa, to try to figure out, what to do. And I had done my OPT. And so in 2009, we had President Obama, and we were seeing how young people in the dreamer community were being detained and were being deported. And we had heard, and we wanted to keep him accountable to his promise that he had made in 2008 to do immigration reform and to provide a path to citizenship for dreamers. And we were seeing that he was breaking his promise, and we decided that we were going to come out and share our stories. And so in 2009 was the last time that I actually had some sort of status during that time. And I decided, along with my friends, to do a walk from Miami to Washington, D.C., called the Trail of Dreams. And let me say that again. We decided to do a walk on foot from Miami to Washington, D.C. to share our stories and to bring about the awareness that we needed to show, right, that this was a situation that was happening. And so our university, Miami-Dade College at the time, Dr. Eduardo Padron was like, what are you doing? Oh, this is dangerous. How are you going to expose yourself? But okay, if you're going to do this, like, let's make sure that you have what you need in order to do that. I had to, give hugs, and my international student director and the people that worked there were so scared for me. And they were like, like, we're going to have to let, immigration know that you are no longer a student and you're going to lose your status again. And I said, I understand, but we're doing this for the greater good. And we're doing this to be able to share, what is happening because of the lack of action and leadership that we are seeing from our government and from our leaders in Washington, D.C. So the Trail of Dreams was actually really successful. And the Trail of Dreams was kind of the spark of what was already brewing, which was a youth movement throughout the United States. And from there, we were able to really show and push the administration and others, right, that we needed to do something. So unfortunately, in 2010, even though the DREAM Act was put up for a vote, and we got really close, it passed in the House, and it actually, I always say it passed in the Senate, but it got filibustered. So we weren't able to get to the 60 votes in order to be able to actually, make it into a law. But it was kind of also a stepping stone that we used in order to push for what eventually became known as DACA. So how many of you have heard of this term DACA? I know now it's like pretty popular. Yeah. So the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program was something that, yes, we'll give credit where credit's due to President Obama and Janet Napolitano and others. But it really was something that was propelled and pushed by the youth. In 2009, we were using deferred action to stop deportations of individuals. And we thought, well, if they're giving this to different folks and community members, what about if they do this for a group of people? And funny enough, do you all know who was the first ever person to get deferred action? I wish I had a lot of money so I can be like, oh, I'll give you $100, but I don't. But who could put in the chat, who do you think was the first person ever that got deferred action? And I'll give you a hint. This person says, you may say that I am a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Who is the famous singer? Yes, John Lennon. So funny enough, good for whoever knew that, but John Lennon was the first person to get deferred action. And he was actually put in deportation proceedings. The Nixon presidency did not like him speaking out against a war and started a deportation proceedings. And his attorney was able to keep him in the United States by doing this thing that they called deferred action. So since then, deferred action had been used, and we thought, what about if we get deferred action for a group of people? Mm-hmm. So in 2011, we actually got this thing called the Morton Memo, which was a priorities on immigration. And the Morton Memo was supposed to be the solution to ensuring that dreamers weren't getting detained. But we quickly saw that that was not the case, that people were still getting detained. And we said, let's push some more. And one of the things that I feel it's really key to always share when we talk about anything, right? How do we get things done? Is that at the end of the day, we should not care if it's a Republican or a Democrat that gets something done. Great if it's both of them working together. But as advocates, I feel that I want to make sure that it's the issue and it's the people at the end of the day that are front and center, not a political party. And so we heard that Senator Marco Rubio was interested in doing some sort of immigration legislation for Dreamers. And I happened to have worked with him when he was the representative here in Miami, when he was the speaker of the House in Tallahassee. And so I reached out, I had a conversation with him. And as soon as I hung up with him and he told me his idea and we had an agreement that we would be working with him on that, I hung up the phone and I picked up the phone to call the White House and said, hey, Senator Rubio has this and we're going to support him, but you have the opportunity to do it too. So who do you want us to support? So through that negotiation, we were able to really pressure the administration to consider this. And eventually on June 15th, 2012, President Obama at the Rose Garden with little birds singing, shared and said, we're going to create this stopgap measure to provide relief for Dreamers, to be able to give them the ability to get two things: protection of deportation and work authorizations. And so 10 years after, the DACA program has been extremely important for the Dreamer community. A little bit less than a year later, I was not eligible, but I applied and received DACA. So I had status again. And I was able to get my driver's license. I was able to get a job that had health insurance, which was really important for me. And also, I, along with other folks like Don Graham, Carlos Gutierrez, and Henry Munoz, in 2013 came together and decided that we wanted to do a scholarship program for Dreamers. And we thought, okay, and we sat around a table and the question was asked, okay, how many of you want to help raise $1 million for this organization? And I shyly put my hand up thinking, I've raised money in the past, but $1 million. And so fast forward to today, we've been able to educate close to 9,000 Dreamers across the nation. They are probably in many of your institutions. We do have certain partnerships with institutions, or the way that the scholarship works does work in partnerships with different institutions. And of those, over 3,000 have already graduated. There are people who are today nurses and teachers, and actually a lot of them are working at our colleges and universities now. So that's really great to see. And for me, I think that one of the things that has been really important, again, back to the work that you do, is that in the absence of Dreamer student centers, in the absence of institutions understanding their population of undocumented students, the International Student Offices has played a very key role in supporting these individuals. And even though they're not international students, these are residents, longtime residents. The average age of our scholars who came to the US is 4. They don't have, like I said before, they come from low income families, so they don't have the resources to pay their tuition usually, let alone books and everything else that comes with the college education. But it's the work that you all have done has been really, really critical in seeing the value that this diverse home kind of taught and grown students have to our education system, our communities, and of course, our country. And so today, the work that I do is to continue to fight for not just policies in Washington, D.C. in order to be able to protect our students and be able to give them access to be able to get a status, and also, protection from being deported from this country. We also work really closely with states. And so right now, for example, I have been driving myself mad a little bit because in the state of Florida, our governor, unfortunately, is using some of these political things to be able to grab national attention. He has a desire to run for president. And one of the things that is in his agenda is to repeal the in-state tuition waiver that was passed in 2014 that has allowed dreamers and individuals and students that have done 3 years of high school, have graduated from our Florida high schools, to be able to get this waiver that allows them to pay in-state tuition. The same is happening in Texas. And if you all are looking from afar, you might see that there is a competition between Governor Abbott and DeSantis of who can be the most conservative on some of these things, because they both have aspirations to run for president. And so in Texas, we've seen that too. But the good news is that there are states, for example, like Maryland, that are currently looking at licensure legislation that would allow anybody to, even if they are fully undocumented, to sit for some of these exams, to be able to become nurses, to be able to become teachers, etc. And we are seeing other states like Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island looking at driver's licenses, looking at licensure, looking at in-state tuition, state aid, etc. So my work has now been trying to focus on some of that too, not just like the federal, but be able to support some of these states and their initiatives. And also protect, I don't know if you all have seen, but for example, in Texas, there has been some bills that they're trying to ban students from certain countries, international students from certain countries, to come in. So for example, there's one that wants to ban Chinese, Russian, Iranian, and a couple of other students from coming into the state of Texas as international students. So there's a lot of synergy there, even though, the like I said, international student population is a little bit different than dreamers, because dreamers are people that came as children to the US. The definition of dreamer, the way that I usually think about it, is those that came before the age of 16, and I've been living here for a period of time. So that's kind of, when we talk about dreamers, that's who we're talking about. Yeah, today we continue to move forward, and we want to make sure that our approach is on the education approach, that we are trying to show the benefit of just having a diverse population of people, that speaking more than one language is not a bad thing, that we know how incredible it's been to be able to have different cultures, especially for food. Back to the food. Yes, I'm a foodie, as you can see from my story, but how amazing, right? That we have all these different cuisines and different things, right? But also just when we talk about competitiveness, right? If we want to be able to, we live in a global economy, a global world. We are so connected more than ever to other countries and other people. And it just makes sense for our institutions, for our country, to have that competitive edge. And that if we have people from other parts of the world that want to make the US their home, that they believe in this American dream that we so hold dear, that those doors of opportunities continue to remain open. I tell this to Republicans all the time, or conservatives, or people that might not necessarily see the value of people that are not US citizens or your typical American. I say the saddest day in America is the day that the rest of the world says that it's not a place where I want to be, that it's not a place where I want to live, where we lose that edge, right, of this is the land of opportunity. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's anybody that has any questions, or if you want me to dig in a little bit more into some of the things that I shared.
Thanks, Gabby, for that. We'll take questions, but also we'll put your organization's link in the chat. And if anyone is interested in learning more or donating to the cause, it'll be there as well. So
And I also want to do a quick shout out to Annie. I see the Ecuadorian flag back there. So go Ecuadorian flag.
My husband's day, Guayaquil as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, he was watching in the beginning, so very proud Ecuadorian.
Nice.
So Gabby, you mentioned some information about state actions that, you know, I certainly wasn't aware of. The fact that Texas is looking, I mean, what do you prognosticating a little bit here, but what do you think the chances are of these bills actually happening, or is it more political theater that you're seeing?
So for Texas has filed about 5 different bills. And some of them I think are just messaging. Some of them I think are going to make it through. And unfortunately, in Texas last year, a group of students guided by a big national conservative group worked with them to sue their own institution for providing in-state tuition to undocumented students and charging out-of-state students out-of-state tuition. And so this case actually was picked up, is being heard in a very conservative court, and more than likely they might actually lose. And so that means that the university is going to be mandated to charge the same rate to out-of-state students, even though that's only for 1 year. And then after that, the students get in-state tuition. But that has kind of opened a can of worms. And I believe that there's a real threat for the first state ever to pass an in-state tuition legislation. Texas has had in-state tuition and state aid for undocumented students since 2001. For them to actually repeal it. In the state of Florida, they have a supermajority, so they don't really need to do anything but just introduce and pass whatever. We actually, for the repeal of the in-state tuition in the state of Florida, there has been some opposition even within the Republican Party, because this was a bill that they championed in 2014. Governor Rick Scott, and at that time, Representative Nunez, who today is the lieutenant governor, she was the one that carried the bill and said that at that time, she said, this is the most significant legislation I have ever done in my career. 2 days ago, she actually spoke out against it, saying, oh, this is a burden to our state, just following kind of suit of the governor. So it's very unfortunate, but at least for Florida and Texas is very real, and they have the numbers, they have the ability to be able to move it. The only thing is that, you know, the Dreamer word, the Dreamer brand has been something that we've been able to, one second. There's somebody at the door. Sorry about that. We now have a brand, and people believe in Dreamers. People believe that this is the right thing to do. So it's becoming harder for them to do something negatively.
Does anybody else have any questions for Gabby? Don't see any. All right, well, Gabby, you held the audience. We've had the same number of participants throughout your keynote. We really thank you for your for this talk today. It's been really informative. I learned a lot about you that I didn't know before. So, you know, thank you for sharing that, and especially with the International Student and Scholar Advisors on. I'm sure I'm sure I speak for all of them in saying how much we appreciate your work and your efforts. And you know, and we support you and hope we have to really keep pushing and advocating on all different levels to make sure that we can hold the ground for the dreamers while we're waiting for Congress to take action, which, you know, is only going to happen if we change the makeup of I think it's probably only going to change if we change the makeup of the Congress. So we thank you for your work. We support you. And I don't know if you had anything else to say, any last words to say.
Yeah, so really quickly, we are going to put up a website called tuitionfairness.com for the state of Florida, and that's going to also serve for Texas for people. But there is, the students started an Instagram account called at Tuition Fairness, so you can follow them to see what they're doing there. But the President's Alliance is also tracking and doing all these different things. I know some of you heard Jill Welch speak from the President's Alliance. The higher ed education immigration portal has really good information, and the Dream.us, we put stuff there as well.
All right, thank you, everybody.